Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap leading into Computex. So we have a lot of news coming up in just about a week from now, but there's still more to talk about today. Leading news item, us, because we did 10,000 points in Firestrike with this thing next to me, and we have a live stream archive if you want to catch that. But spoiler alert, again, we ended up scoring 10,009 points with the whole unit. Lots of fun. Thank you for joining us. We might do a recap later. So that's a cool news item. But other than that, China is meeting with Micron over DRAM pricing. Yikes. And AMD B450 chipset specs. JPR has a Q1 2018 GPU report that we've talked about a bit, but we have more information on it. And a couple of new product announcements that we'll go through as well. Before that, this video is brought to you by Corsair's iQ software update, which finally bridges Q peripheral software with elements of Corsair Link. iQ takes a major step forward for game integration, bridging RGB LED illumination with in-game effects in Far Cry 5, and supports Corsair's entire product ecosystem with a single software solution. Download iQ at the link in the description below. So again, for a quick recap on this thing, we end up basically putting a custom water cooler on a Hades Canyon NUC. It's the Intel and AMD combination unit. Overclocked it pretty high. We hit 4864 megahertz or so, 4880 in that range. And on the GPU, we were at 1400 megahertz. Very good for that thing. And we even changed out the power brick for a laptop one that was slightly more powerful just to get that extra headroom. And then the other news item quickly is that the 3D laser engraved cubes we have, the glass teardown crystals, are now in stock and shipping, and the mod mat is in stock and shipping, so I'll keep it short, but basically the point is, if you buy it, it's shipping now as opposed to being a back order like previously. First major news item, China meeting with Micron over DRAM pricing. So at this point, the upward RAM pricing is really no surprise to anyone. We've talked about it a lot, but it seems to command everyone's attention, and perhaps most attentive is China. And China has good reason, the government that is, to be attentive. That's because China is the world's largest consumer of DRAM and memory, consuming about 20% of DRAM supply and 25% of global NAND supply. Quite a lot. All over the world, that is the largest consumer of DRAM and NAND. To that effect, China's Anti-Monopoly Bureau has met with Micron regarding DRAM price trends. And there are little details on the meeting, but we can mostly just read between the lines for now. This meeting comes after a similar meeting with Samsung, another major memory supplier, and a looming class action lawsuit that's currently in complaint status, but we should have a response from the defendants soon. That'd be Hynix, Samsung, and Micron are the defendants in this one. So between all those things revolving around DRAM pricing, it's looking like there's some actual investigation going on potential collusion of memory prices right now. China's meeting with Samsung is said to have potential increased production impacts with the Samsung memory supply, and Micron's meeting with the Chinese government agencies might bear similar results, where the prices mysteriously go down and the supply mysteriously starts going up. China hasn't pointed their gaze at SK Hynix yet, as far as we're publicly aware, but given the current climate, we can expect the Chinese government to do that sooner rather than later. So we'll see. This is a very interesting story to look at. Just a quick reminder, the class action filed in the US is still a complaint. There's nothing proven, so the defendants have a chance to respond basically paragraph by paragraph to that class action complaint, and it's coming up on their deadline at this point, so we should know soon what they say, but eventually it may go somewhere, and if it goes somewhere, that's when we'll start looking into whether there was actually price fixing or not. Even if some of it was just very interesting coincidence. Next news item, AMD's B450 chipset specs have been spoiled. So AMD is readying the successor to their B350 mid-range chipset, and the B450 chipset, no surprise, is slated to release in the second half of this year. B450 will support 2000 series CPUs out of the box, one of the major upgrades, and by upgrade I mean they flashed BIOS. And it will also retain overclocking support, as B350 did previously. And then finally, it's got the same amount of USB, same amount of SATA, same amount of PCIe connectivity as the B350 predecessor, so nothing's really changed there. But the idle power draw of the chipset is less than 2 watts, so that's gone down a bit. And for actual meaningful changes, memory support should be a bit better on B450, just like it was with X470. That was the main change, 470 versus 370. No real difference in terms of I/O support or HSIO lanes or anything like that that you'd expect with a chipset. Just changes with the memory support, which falls more on the motherboard tuning than the literal chipset. But given that motherboard vendors are focusing more on new chipsets, not old ones, they're going to have better memory support for the new stuff. So B450 should follow that line with X470. Also, B450 will support NVMe RAID, which was previously exclusive to X399. Pretty small use case there. But those are the differences we know of right now for the specs with B450. Next one, John Petty Research and the first quarter 2018 GPU report. We talked about this a bit a couple weeks ago in a news item, but there's some more to discuss here. So the latest report from JPR suggests that the crypto mining market has finally become saturated, suggesting that miners wanting cards have gotten them. The report indicates that cryptocurrency mining is still influencing the PC graphics market, but that influence is waning and gamer interest is allegedly increasing. So here's where it gets a bit interesting. The GPU shipment rate, we talked about this previously, is up 66% annually, with over 3 million add-in board cards shipped to miners in 2017, another 1.7 million shipped in the quarter. And we previously talked about NVIDIA's results for the last quarter, the most recent quarter as well, where they had some of their own mining numbers, I think about 300 million in mining revenue directly logged. JPR forecasts that due to the mining fizzling out, at least for the time being, gamers are seeing supply increase and prices, hopefully, coming a bit down, which we'll actually be talking about that in the hardware news at the end of this episode. JPR also expects that gamer interest will be strong in quarter 2, and assuming all is well, and that should offset the normal quarter 2 seasonal decline. All this is good news for gamers and PC builders on our side of the market, as long as JPR's prognosticating holds true. Of course, all it takes is a random unforeseen spike in various currency values to find ourselves again in another mining boom, but it's looking okay right now. Next up, Arctic has announced their first AM4 passive CPU cooler called the Alpine AM4, presumably intended to be used with AMD's APUs, most likely. The cooler can be used with any AM4 AMD CPU, and with a TDP of no more than 46 watts. So this means that users could use CPUs from AMD's 1000 or 2000 series that have TDP set to obviously 46 or lower. The Alpine AM4 should be relatively simple to install. It comes with 4 springs and screws, pretty straightforward stuff, and MX2 thermal compound pre-applied. Nothing special there either. There's a 6-year warranty to round out the features, notably. I mean, it's a piece of metal, so not really much to go wrong with it. Pricing isn't final, but as we've seen online, it shouldn't be more than $20 and more likely to be about $15. It's potentially a good fit for the low power components, maybe some of the low end APUs. Next, also in cooler company news, typically, Cryorig has a new Frostbit M.2 SSD cooler. So Cryorig intends to unveil this M.2 SSD cooler at Computex, again coming up in about a week. We'll be there. And it's dubbed the Frostbit M2 SSD cooler. The new cooler will feature a dual heat pipe design attached to a small fin stack that is pivotable as to remain outside of GPU and add-in board clearances for PCIe slots. The thermal suggestion for the Frostbit M.2 is 12 watts and will require a degree of airflow over the fin array, obviously, to actually do anything to get rid of the heat, but it'll still at least spread it. No details yet on pricing and availability, but expect more in about a week at Computex. Quick note here, for M.2 SSD, well actually for any SSD, flash memory, so NAND, actually does not like being cold. When you're using it actively, it's better for the NAND's life, for its lifespan and its endurance, for it to be warmer. When it is inactive and stored, you want it cold, hence the name cold storage. But when it's active, it's actually better for it to be warmer than colder. So if you were actually chilling it actively, you'd be killing your flash memory. With something like this, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. What you really want to cool is the controller, not the memory. This is kind of a solution that will definitely cool the controller and the memory. But unless you're basically ambient or below ambient for the most part, you don't have much to worry about for endurance. Just keep it in mind that cooler flash is not actually better, unlike most other components, but a cooler controller is. The next one, Micron and QLC NAND SSDs have been in the news a bit. So Micron revealed they are shipping their new Ion SSD lineup, and this is going to be for specific customers and partners. Micron's new 5210 Ion SSDs are among the first to offer QLC NAND and will offer capacities up to 7.68 terabytes and a 2.5-inch form factor. The SSDs are slated for full release in the fall and are headed to the data center segment as is usually the case with leading-edge storage technologies. The storage technology will eventually come down to the consumer market, as Micron has made evident. QLC NAND stores 4 bits per cell and uses 16 voltage states. It's a feat that ultimately reduces NAND endurance, but pays off in storage capacity. If you're curious about how this works in general, how NAND works, what MLC, TLC, SLC are, those things, we have a video on it. You can just search the channel for how flash NAND works or something like that. Just search for NAND flash, you'll find it. So yeah, 16 voltage states, and Micron's 1 terabit QLC, or 128 gigabytes for the die, provides 33% more density than their previous MLC die, and this can theoretically allow Micron to construct NAND packages using fewer dies and still offer increasing storage capacities. Micron's new SSDs offer the latest enterprise safety features like power loss protection, data path protection, 5-year warranties, and internal RAID features. And Micron's QLC can withstand 1,000 PE cycles, not a whole lot, but it's what you get with capacity, and offers 1 DWPD, or drive write per day, is the metric of endurance. For the present, QLC NAND is intended to be used for read-intensive enterprise storage, and endurance is not a paramount concern for that implementation. And related to this, Micron and Intel are delivering the first 4-bit per cell QLC memory die. So this is the same used as in those SSDs we just talked about. It's part of the joint memory venture from Intel and Micron, who have delivered the first 64-layer, 1 terabit QLC NAND die. As previously mentioned, this is memory that's used in Micron's newest SATA-based 5210 enterprise SSD. While Intel hasn't yet announced any products using QLC, you can be sure they're going to. That's probably why they're working with them. Potentially at Computex or FMS, the Flash Memory Summit, in August for that one. This one feels personal. NZXT is launching the H700D, D for dumb, so there's no more, actually technically they didn't call it that. But we've been calling it the H700D since we reviewed the H700i, and that was actually stolen from a Patreon backer. But basically, D for dumb, meaning they took out the smart device. So it's a trivial news item. NZXT is relaunching their H700, H200, and H400 cases without the smart device and at lower prices. This is something that we strongly agree with. So the H700i, as a reminder, we actually really liked. We gave it an award in our end-of-year roundup of cases, and like the build quality a lot. Airflow is okay, it's certainly manageable. Build quality is very good though, and they do a few unique things with the design. The downside was that the smart device wasn't at the launch particularly smart, and it definitely cost a lot. You paid for that thing. So now they have the H700 non-I, which we always wanted, and that's $150. A steep reduction, definitely worth picking up because the case overall is good. It was just overpriced, that smart device. The H400 is now $100. 200 is now $90. We can strongly recommend the H700 here. Haven't worked with the 400 and 200 too much though, but same idea overall. And the design is, again, unique. It's got good color accents, good build quality. It was just that smart device was really holding it back. So glad to see that. And we have a review on the H700i. If you're curious about it, just ignore everything about the i, and you'll get the idea for the H700. And then final news item before hardware news for the week. Apex Gaming, which is a relatively new case maker from last year actually, has announced a new case called the X-Mars. The X-Mars enclosure has taken the X marcation to new levels. The Apex Gaming X-Mars has an X plastered across the front and center of the case, behind which rests a dust filter and at least 3 fans. Renders of the case show it as equipped with upwards of 10 fans, with 3 mounted near the PSU shroud, 3 on drive cages, 1 in the rear and 3 in the front. Certainly looks interesting, but its price is terrifying. The X-Mars full tower will be available for $1,000. The company also noted that there's an X-Mars Junior, probably the worst possible suffix you could throw on a case, available for $190. If we put 2 interior shots side by side of the X-Mars and X-Mars Junior, you'll see the differences. They primarily exist in embellishments, holes dotting the drive cages and power supply shroud, and overall size. And then finally, hardware news. We saw an EVGA CLC 280, which is one of the better closed-loop liquid coolers on the market if you want one of those, marked down to $110. So that's a good price for that, actually. Very competitive with other 280s on the market, especially the more RGB-happy ones that tend to be up towards $150. So we like that cooler for that price. The MSI 1070 Ti Duke is also available for $470 after rebates, roughly $490, depending on if you're looking at Amazon or Newegg. and we'll link both of those in the description below if you want to pick one of them up. 1070 Ti for $470, $490 is actually basically MSRP. So relating to the JPR news item, sounds like the prices might be somewhat normalizing. That's a reasonable price to pay for 1070 Ti. So really happy to see some return to normalcy for the PC market. That's it for this one. Subscribe to make sure you catch all the Computex coverage. We'll be there in a couple of days. The show doesn't start till next week, but we're getting there early to do some factory tours. So subscribe so you can catch those. And as always, go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly, or store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our mod mats or the 3D laser engraved logo cubes, which are now both of these items shipping, not on back order anymore. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.